Okay, I think we're good to go. Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. My name is Shyla Davison, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for iDigBio, and I'm honored to serve as your MC for this important conversation today. We're here to explore the vital role herbaria play, not just as repositories of plant specimens, but as dynamic centers for research, education, and public engagement. In an era where scientific institutions face increasing challenges, advocacy becomes essential to ensure these collections continue to inform and inspire. Today, we'll hear updates regarding Duke's decision to divest herbarium collections and learn more about how community-driven initiatives and effective advocacy strategies can play pivotal roles in defending and promoting the value of herbaria and similar scientific institutions. Before we dive in, I'd like to share a quick note about today's format. We'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentations. However, feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature at any point during the talks. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. Additionally, the chat will be open for comments and discussion throughout the session. Now, let's get started with this important conversation. We have a great lineup of speakers, and I'm pleased to hand things over to Kathleen Pryer, Director of Duke Herbarium. Kathleen, the floor is yours. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Good to go.
Perfect.
All right. I'm Kathleen Pryer, Professor of Biology at Duke University, and I've been Director of the Duke Herbarium for the last 20 years. The Duke Herbarium is more than 100 years old. It comprises nearly 1 million specimens, and from the pie chart on the left, you can see that half of these are vascular plants. Bryophytes and lichens make up most of the other half, and algae and fungi constitute about 3% of the collection. The Duke Herbarium is especially rich in records of the southeastern flora of the United States and also Latin America, both important global biodiversity hotspots. It also houses critical voucher specimens, not yet, but for many molecular, biochemical, and cytogenetic research studies that significantly enhance the research value of the collection, making it unique among peer institutions. There are about 38 R1 universities in the US with herbaria that hold more than 200,000 specimens. Duke University is within the top 10 and has served as one of the most significant and influential resources and training programs in plant and fungal diversity for many decades. The value of the Duke Herbarium is best appreciated from external measures, metrics that include its loan activity and publications that cite the collection. Here's an example from 2010, where more than 250 specimen loans of variable size were sent to or from Duke and involved the exchange of roughly 16,000 specimens. An annual average of 80 peer-reviewed papers were published by researchers worldwide who consulted and cited the Duke Herbarium. And I think these numbers in and of themselves speak volumes for the global relevance of the collection for a wide spectrum of research needs. In February 2024, the 5 biology faculty who utilize the herbarium for their collections-based research and teaching received without warning an email from the Dean of Natural Sciences at Duke, Susan Alberts, and the Chair of Biology, Emily Bernhardt, indicating their decision to divest the herbarium. What I wish to make eminently clear at this point, back to the other slide, is that the administrators who made this decision without any consultation with the biology faculty are not your typical university officials. They are distinguished faculty colleagues in biology who are also members of the National Academy of Science. These are veterans of faculty meetings rife with buzzwords like biodiversity, climate change, ecology, and conservation. At the risk of appearing tedious, please allow me to read you a couple of paragraphs of the email so the vibe of the directive is clear. We have carefully considered the requirements to maintain the herbarium in the manner at which it should be maintained, which would include multiple endowed faculty and staff lines, as well as state-of-the-art facilities. We have concluded that because of this large set of needed resources, it's in the best interests of both Duke and the herbarium to find a new home or homes for these collections. The collection deserves to be in a facility that has the resources to maintain it for posterity. It went on to say that we see this as a loss for Duke, and we fully appreciate that it is also a major loss for each of you personally, as you have devoted your professional lives to the important work of creating, maintaining, and studying it. But we do see it as a net positive in the long run for the collection, and that is an important consideration. Just a month before this email appeared, I was interviewed by the Duke magazine, which is a magazine that is sent out especially to Duke alum. And I was featured on something about the herbarium. A potential donor reached out to me after reading the article, and when the dean got wind of it, this is how she reacted, by telling us the herbarium at Duke was dead. Needless to say, I was generous in sharing this email widely. The subsequent responses and reactions from the community at large were fast and furious. Jillian Goodwin of iDigBio immediately set up a petition on change.org that quickly garnered more than 20,000 signatures. Student reporters in the Duke Chronicle accused Duke of killing its biodiversity program. Science Magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Boston Globe all carried scathing articles. Every single professional society in the US wrote letters asking Duke's top administrators to reconsider their decision. Botanical communities outside the US wrote letters expressing their outrage. Colleagues wrote thoughtful opinion pieces in prominent journals. Duke made no response to any of these outcries, and the barrage of bad publicity rendered Duke mute, except for this one quote on the local NPR station by Duke's executive provost, Professor Mohammed Noor, a biology faculty member and former dean of natural sciences at Duke. He said, maintaining a herbarium of this size and value would absolutely require that we hire faculty specifically to study its collections consistently and without any lapses. The department could not maintain the facility without losing the freedom to hire other faculty based on new areas of scientific discovery. We do prioritize natural history, Noor said, but deciding what specific sub-areas of natural history that Duke biology will follow up on in the next 100 years cannot be locked into what it's been doing the past 100 years. If you're interested in reading these responses, there is a curated list available at this link on the front page of the Duke Herbarium website. Quietly, Duke recently interviewed 3 institutions: New York Botanic Garden, the Botanical Research Institute of Texas, and the University of North Carolina, who expressed an interest in rescuing the Duke collection. These interviews resulted in Duke realizing that no one was going to just appear and take it away without Duke making a serious financial investment in facilitating the move. The curators have not received any further directives since February 2024, and we are unplugging Duke from the Herbarium network and returning all loans to their home institutions in anticipation of an eventual shutdown. We are in a vacuum. We know nothing. The only bright spot for me in this whole ordeal was simultaneously meeting a new Duke professor in art history, Andrew Griebeler, who wanted to access this herbarium for his teaching. And we instantly became a dynamic duo together with some wonderful Duke biology undergrads in our fight for the herbarium. And here I will turn things over to my friend, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. So I came to Duke only about a month before all of this started. Quick check, everybody can hear me, right?
Yes, you sound good.
Good. So I'm an art historian who studies the intersections of art science and nature in the medieval Mediterranean. I mainly work with very old botanical manuscripts, but I have used herbaria in my research, and I was excited to use the Duke Herbarium in my teaching. So when I arrived on campus, I reached out to Kathleen to organize a class visit. I wanted my class to visit the herbarium to see how collections serve research in various fields. I wanted the class to appreciate just how deep the history of botany is and how the distant past leave traces in contemporary science. The class in particular that I was teaching was narrowly focused on the myth of Medusa, as you can see here, and I wanted the class to investigate the intersections of mythology and botany, especially in botanical nomenclature, and how botanists use mythological references to think through relationships between ecology and morphology. I envision this as only a start. I was looking forward to planning other class visits for other classes and involving the herbarium in my research. All of this was before we learned about the administration's decision. Duke's decision touched a nerve with me. I'm an art historian, I'm a historian. Collections and archives are essential for my work, and it is essential for collections-based researchers to watch each other's backs. When I found out about the decision, I organized a tour for my department to visit the herbarium with the aim of increasing the herbarium's visibility beyond the natural sciences, and also to encourage outreach and work across campus. One of the reasons for this was directly in response to a claim that herbaria are of no interest to the broader campus community beyond a handful of plant systematists. What you see on the slide here is one result of that tour. These are pictures from a series of class visits by a Principles of Design course taught by Raquel Salvatea de Prado in my department. You can also see here examples of some of the students' sketches. It was also as a result of this tour that I came into dialogue with Hannah Jacobs, a digital humanities specialist at Duke. We started talking, brainstorming about how we could help this situation. We noticed that there was a lot of confusion on campus. There was a lot of outrage, but also a lot of uncertainty. Students didn't seem clear about what an herbarium is, and they weren't really clear about the important roles that herbaria play in conserving biodiversity. Many people on campus thought that the herbarium was already gone. And there was also a tremendous amount of opacity from the administration. So at this point, I'd like to turn over to Hannah Jacobs, digital humanities specialist at Duke.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everyone. As Andrew mentioned, I had joined a tour, and I joined the tour of the herbarium that he organized with Kathleen and staff at the herbarium because I'm ashamed to say I grew up in Durham, I grew up around Duke, and I had been working at Duke for more than a decade, and I had never heard of the herbarium. One of the things that I do in my job is I help faculty, especially humanities faculty, connect with technologies that can support research and other kinds of public humanities projects. And in conversation with Andrew, as we were thinking about the responses that we were seeing on and off campus, and the confusion in the community, especially on Duke's campus about what a herbarium was, we thought, well, what can we do as a kind of response uh, to the announcement of the closure? And so we came up with the idea to create a social media account as a way to document what was in the herbarium, make the materials more visible to the world, especially to Duke students, and to also document to whatever extent we could the divestment from the herbarium. So we started with Instagram. And if you want to go back to the last slide, Kaylee, that would be great. Thank you. We started with Instagram, and Kaylee and Erin are going to talk a little bit more about where things have gone. But the idea was that we wanted to reach the Duke student body, and we knew that Instagram was a popular platform. So what better way to reach them? Of course, it's had some important impacts off campus, and Kaylee's going to talk a little bit more about that. But what we wanted to do was create a space that could be a kind of archive that documents what's in Duke's herbarium, especially when it's no longer at Duke. So that's the starting point for the project. And one of the things that we did, because of my work connecting with technologies, was to think about a few creative ways that go beyond 2D photography to be able to share the collections. And we have a team member, Matthew Sickanese, who's a Duke alumnus, who connected us with a virtual reality education company called Meridian Treehouse. And they loaned us a structured light 3D scanner. And we wanted to test out, just as an experiment, what it might be like to create 3D models of some of the specimens. This is work that I have a fair amount of experience working with photogrammetry, which is a process of taking many photographs and then stitching them together to create a model. And so we got together last summer and began creating some of those models as a way to help students on Instagram and others following us see in maybe a slightly more tactile way what we were actually working with in the herbarium, especially for specimens that have more height or depth to them, so that folks could see those. And Kaylee, if you'll go to the next slide. We've started releasing some of these just as one example on Instagram, and there may be a few more to come. But if you're interested in learning more about this process, I'm happy to talk about it. The idea being not to replace physical specimens, because of course those are extremely important for research, but finding ways through Instagram and through other technologies to be able to bring people closer to the collections. So now I want to turn things over to Erin, who's going to talk a little bit about the process that we went through to create posts and how we actually decide what kinds of posts we create and the content that they contain. So Erin, if you'd like to introduce yourself and take it from here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Hannah. My name is Erin Heyeck. I'm currently a master's student at Duke studying business, but before that, as a Duke undergrad studying biology. And like, unfortunately, most of my peers at Duke and even studying biology, I did not know there was a herbarium at Duke until my senior year, which is really a shame. And that's one of the major reasons that I joined this project, is to share the value that the Duke Herbarium brings to our community. And so starting an Instagram and deciding what stories we want to tell felt really overwhelming when starting this project, especially with the collection so large. And so one of the activities that we did to start this project was creating a content approval checklist. This was both an exercise to help us decide when we felt the post was ready to be published, as well as what kind of content we wanted to put out there. To go a little bit more in depth, one of the things that we focused on was our core values and what kind of content would reflect our core values. So these are just some of the areas that we wanted to highlight. But we also wanted to keep in mind our audience. We wanted to be accessible for a wide range of audience, not just Duke students, but anyone interested in learning more about botany, more about what a herbarium does and the value it creates. And so I think this was one of our, initial activities that really helped set us down a path that we felt creating content was easier to do. Moving forward, we also started to track our follower count and other metrics that help us define what success looks like with this Instagram project. It can be very overwhelming to think our small Instagram account can help tackle issues like the divestment of a herbarium, but we wanted to create smaller success metrics that help us, see our path forward. And some of those include statistics that Instagram gives us, like our follower count, viewership, and other things like that. So since September, we've made it up to, I believe, 930 followers. But it can also be very important to focus on non-quantitative metrics. We want to spark interest in the comments about something unique at the herbarium, sharing other people's experiences, and engaging the Duke and outer botanical community about the value that the Duke Herbarium brings. And so I want to pass it off to Kaylee, who is a fellow Duke student and helps lead our content creation and organization, to share a little bit more about what engagement looks like with our Instagram.
Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate that introduction. And, just to preface, just like with what Erin was talking about, we wanted to have a certain approach in keeping our audience in mind for our Instagram account and really try to assess who was going to be looking at our content. And firstly, we had Duke students in mind. We wanted to try to reach out to Duke students so that Duke students would know that we have an herbarium on campus. But, since Instagram is already where a lot of these students are, we already know that these people were going to be there, but we didn't expect all of the people that were going to be following us, which, many of them are beyond Duke. That includes botanists, researchers, educators, science communicators, other herbaria, and just curious people who love plants. And, that's a lot of you here. So I'm going to be sharing just how we've been using social media, especially Instagram, to tell stories about the herbarium, build a good community, and also advocate for the preservation of collections like ours, and some of them we'll be talking about today. So here, as you can see on the slide, just to talk about some of our more popular posts that we've had. The first set shows our popular posts with one of them being over 2,000 likes. And this is where we posted about the podcast episode that happened just shortly after the divestment in March of 2024, that both Dr. Pryer as well as Dr. Wyndham in the Herbarium, they both did together on the popular podcast, Crime Pays But Botany Doesn't. You should definitely go check that out and go look at our post about that from a few months ago. But we also have some more popular posts that indicate that people love to see pictures of the herbarium itself, but also the faces behind it, just like Dr. Pryer. And these posts performed really well and helped reach people who may not otherwise engage with herbarium content in person at our herbarium. And so we've also found that people really care about the herbarium status, as well as the issues that herbaria address, like understanding species linked to climate change before they go extinct, and of course, biodiversity. And so this also includes an opinion column in our university's chronicle, as you can see on the right-hand side, which indicated that the university's incentives on climate commitments that were recently supposed to be fulfilled by the university and in which they claim to would not be fully met if the herbarium is divested. Our post about NSF firings of our recent colleagues, extinction events, and student op-eds, they all drew very strong engagement, especially when we pair them with really bold visuals or clear calls to action. We actually just posted another one of the extinction posts today. Feel free to check that out. And after this, we'll show you a QR code for you to be sent off to the Instagram as well. And we've also used specimens to help to tell deeper environmental stories, like the Azolla posts, which linked plant history to planetary climate change. And this was actually posted by our very own Dr. Pryer. And these posts are informative, but also provoke curiosity. And we found that they invite comments and shares from folks outside of typical botany circles, especially those who are particularly passionate about our climate. And then there's Lady Gaga. So these posts were definitely some of our most viral. They were fun and campy, but still grounded in real science. And back in 2012, these ferns we found, including Dr. Pryer, especially led this movement, found that GAGA, is actually encoded in their DNA. And the fern gametophyte, as you can see on the left-hand side, that little blue gametophyte in that picture, that resembles her outfit in the 2010 Grammy Awards. And so the link was very obvious. We even received pictures of the fern from Gaga herself and her manager, as you can see in that middle post right there. And, you know, even though this happened in 2012, about 13 years ago, posting about it now on our Instagram still receives very striking reactions, as I'm sure many of you are reacting to right now as well. And so what we wanted to see as well is not just the influence that our posts have on our community and the community beyond, but we also started to see some measurable influence among other herbaria on the same platform since we started pushing our content back in September of 2024. And, you know, this includes, as you can see on the slide, Manitoba increasing their posting to about 8 times a month. Oregon State now posts over a dozen times a month. Eastern Washington University, Montana, and UTK all ramped up their content after these interactions. And so it's really encouraging to see this network growing and to see how our content is fostering outreach initiatives that are beyond our own university. And of course, those universities as well are also leading their own initiatives and trying to get their content out in the world and try to work with the public in this regard. And so some of the final points I want to make, the engagement has been really amazing, you know, lots of shares, likes on stories and highlights, even on our posts, which has been very great, thoughtful comments, and even some back and forth conversation in some threads. But some of our most powerful responses have come on posts about divestment and preservation. You know, people have shared memories, frustrations, even letters that they've sent to the administration on our behalf. And these posts remind us that people actually care. It's not just about plants, but also about the institutions that preserve them and the people that come with them. There's a lot more at stake than just the plants themselves, even though that should be reason enough. And so with that, I'll hand it off to Erin to close out Duke's portion of the webinar about how you can get involved. Erin?
Thanks, Kaylee. I know that this has probably been pretty interesting. It's been a really great project to be a part of, but if you're itching to get involved, there are a number of ways to do so. The first and probably simplest would be to follow us on Instagram and get updates about the status of the herbarium or botany, and the stories we share about the herbarium in general is a great place. Next would be to sign the petition that's on change.org that's been up for quite a while. Or if you're very interested, writing a letter to the Duke administration that has been involved in this decision. We've listed here quite a number of emails that you can use. And with that, I will hand it off to Jillian from iDigBio to give a little bit more.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you to everyone else. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jill Goodwin, and I'm the Conference and Events Manager for iDigBio. I help to coordinate events like this for iDigBio to further digitization and accessibility of biological specimen data from natural history collections. Quick thank you to Kathleen Pryer and everyone at Duke for sharing this story with me and letting me be a part of it. And thank you to Shyla for your help and participation today. Next slide. Last year, after hearing the news that Duke Herbarium's future was at risk, I immediately went onto the iDigBio portal to look through the specimen records from the collection. For years, I worked as a naturalist on Grandfather Mountain in western North Carolina. I immediately came across this specimen of turkey beard that was collected in 1932 by Hugo Bloomquist. Kaylee, if you could click one more time. So the specimen was actually on the label. It says that it was collected on the side of Grandfather Mountain. Bloomquist founded the herbarium in 1921, and a little over a decade later, he was collecting a specimen from Grandfather Mountain, most likely in a xeric oak pine glade, maybe one that I had monitored before. I felt a connection to the issue. Not only was this a threat to collections, but it was a threat to the botanical history of North Carolina, a place I have a deep connection with. I decided to explore how I could contribute to this issue and decided to make the change.org campaign, or at least start looking into it. Today, I'll share some proven tactics that can be used to broaden your collection's reach through smart communication and collaboration. In these changing times, I think many of us are looking for ways for collections to broaden their reach, visibility, and remain relevant. Together, we need to find ways to convince all of society that the importance of science and research are not political issues and that they contribute to better tomorrows. By utilizing many of these tactics, the Duke Herbarium has continued to generate interest in decisions being made. I understand this is not the story of success or outcome we all hoped for. I know the real immediate challenges and concerns we're all facing right now. I too am worried. But if you are looking for ways to fight for the future of your collection or collections in general, I hope these tips can be useful. So first, engage trusted messengers. Identify and collaborate with respected voices in the field, such as institutions, researchers, societies, or organizations like iDigBio, to amplify your message and lend credibility to your advocacy efforts. iDigBio's director, Gil Nelson, also a Southeastern botanist, supported me in creating this campaign and immediately reached out to Barbara Tears, Jasna Pandy, AIBS, and Spinach to help us get the word out. Eventually, 10 organizations signed the change.org petition, many of who independently coordinated their own efforts. Next, craft a compelling narrative. Use storytelling to highlight the importance of collections, focusing on their scientific, cultural, and societal impact. Personal stories and real-world applications make advocacy more relatable and persuasive. Know your audience and understand what is going to spark their interest. Keep messaging concise, informative, and provide opportunity to take action, share, sign, write, etc. I posted this to my wall on Facebook. If you're my friend, I hope that you're an advocate for biodiversity and species discovery. The message was short, hopefully tugged at heartstrings, and all my friends had to do was click and share. iDigBio's messaging was similar too. Next, leverage strategic communication channels. Use social media, webinars, press releases, and professional networks to spread awareness. Create a list of potential stakeholders you could engage with and areas of interest for them. Think of collaborations and avenues to network and connect. Map your networks of collaboration and find the easiest channels to make the biggest impact. Take advantage of the connections you already have with other botanists and scientists, but also look for other collaborative opportunities beyond collections. Look to departments within your institution that might be interested in assessing business or marketing opportunities. Look at art and humanities like Duke did. Look at state and local nonprofit opportunities to collaborate on grants. Federal grants are still out there too. Next, mobilize community support. Encourage grassroots efforts by engaging stakeholder groups and creating messaging to engage their audiences. Provide clear calls to action, such as signing petitions, writing letters, attending events, or even just sharing relevant news articles. The perspective and content for all of these messages is different, tailored to best appeal to their audience. These are just a few examples of the press generated, from local news coverage, an article from Science with the saddest picture of Kathleen Pryer, and then if you click again, a beautifully written article in the Washington Post featuring a picture of a pink lady slipper specimen that was also collected by Bloomquist. And then most recent article in the Duke Chronicle, right off the bat, quoting a Duke alumni voicing his opposition to administrative decisions. Lastly, stay proactive and persistent. Advocacy and awareness is an ongoing process. Stay informed, build long-term relationships with stakeholders, and be ready to act quickly when collections face threats or funding opportunities arise. But also know your limits and look for ways to engage with individuals and groups who can help make your life easier, not leave you doing all the heavy lifting, because effective engagement is a lot of work, believe me. Next. So if you're interested in exploring avenues to increase your collaborations and connections, tell stories, not just the stories you want to share, but the stories others want to hear. Meet people where they are. Look for opportunities to share these stories through other channels tailored for those audiences. Find unlikely allies. Look for opportunities to network with new stakeholder groups and make connections. Open your doors. Build a community by inviting people into your collections or bring the collections to them. Lastly, thank you all again for being here and for all that you do. I am now going to pass the mic to Barbara Tears, who's going to provide more of a view of how leaders within our community are working to advocate for our shared priorities, navigate current challenges, and identify opportunities for strengthening and sustaining natural history collections in the future. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time if there's anything I can ever do to help, or if you just want to talk more. Thanks, folks. And I'm going to pass it to Barbara.
Thanks, Jill. My name is Barbara Tears. I'm the Director Emerita of the New York Botanical Garden and Herbarium, and currently a research associate at the Denver Botanic Garden. The decision to close the Duke Herbarium is not only a tragedy for the university, but for the entire collections community. It's usually a complete surprise to us when we hear that a collection is threatened, and we scramble to mount an indignant response, as Jill described, but usually it's too late. And inevitably, the question arises whether or not anything could have been done to predict and therefore prevent the closure. Next slide, please. Herbaria are better documented than most collections because our forebears created Index Herbariorum almost a century ago. For those unfamiliar, this community resource provides the full correct name, location, and content information for approximately 4,000 herbaria that are included. The entry for an herbarium also summarizes the contents and gives information about the staff associated with the herbarium. And any herbarium with at least one specimen can create their own entry in the index. I've been the editor of IH for about 15 years, and in that context, I'm often interviewed by media outlets covering a herbarium closure. The reporter is usually hoping to substantiate that there is a global or national trend toward the closure of herbaria. But Index Herbarium data actually indicate the opposite. There are about 800 new herbaria that have been registered in the past 9 years, 157 of these in the United States, far outnumbering the closures. There have been only 106 reported closures during that time, 25 of which were in the United States. Next slide, please. IH statistics may not have predictive value for which herbaria are under threat, but given the current climate for funding museums, research, education, and the global financial outlook in general, it seems very possible that we may be hearing about more closures in the next few years. Representatives of Spinach, NSCA, Beacon, and iDigBio will be meeting soon to discuss ways to mitigate potential loss or disruption to biological collections due to unanticipated cuts in direct government or institutional support. The actions shown on this slide are just a few ideas of ways the community could work together to support collections going forward. The task force is just a nucleus of an idea at the moment, but if you would like to follow or possibly contribute to this effort, or just share information about the current status of your own collection, please follow the link or the QR code on the screen to access a Google form and respond to the prompts. The information gathered here may be made publicly available in summarized form, but when shared, no institution will be identified by name, nor any specific comments attributed to an individual or institution. Next slide, please. The proposed task force is just one community action under consideration. There's plenty of room for others. But what could you do at home to safeguard your own collection? The earlier presentations in this webinar have given brilliant advice about how to manage a savvy outreach program. But equally important, or more important maybe, is promoting your collection to your superiors, and now might be a good time for a little self-audit of your efforts in this area. If you feel you could be doing more, this slide gives some suggestions that I've either used myself or have learned about from others. Fundamentally, they boil down to increasing your visibility and direct communication with the decision makers in your institution. This needs to be an ongoing effort, just like mounting and filing specimens or whatever other day-to-day curatorial work you do. Next slide, please. My final suggestion is to expand your local network. I've been thinking for a while that regional cross-collection collaboration may be an underutilized way to strengthen and problem solve for our collections and to provide help in emergency situations. I was delighted, therefore, to have a front row seat to how this could work through the resolution of a simple but critical problem here in Denver this winter. In a nutshell, the Denver Botanical Garden needed to freeze a lot of collections quickly, but only had a standard chest freezer. The Denver Museum of Nature, just down the road, Museum of Nature and Science, just down the road, has a freezer large enough to hold a giraffe. DBG problem solved. This example is all the more special to me in that the people who made it happen are two of my favorite young collections professionals, Matthew Sheik and Cameron Pittman, both of whom is my pleasure to work with as part of the Biodiversity Collections Network's BioFair project. I'll end by reinforcing what other speakers in this webinar have made abundantly clear. Probably somewhere near you are students or emerging professionals who have new types of knowledge, new ways of communicating, and fresh energy to both help and inspire you. Invite them in and learn from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all of the speakers today, and for Jill for all your hard work putting this incredible conversation together. Now that we've wrapped up the presentations, we're excited to move on to the Q&A portion of our session. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to submit it, or feel free to raise your hand. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. Jill, do you want to take it away?
First question, how are you partnering with your development fundraising colleagues to solicit funding for the herbarium? Kathleen, do you want to unmute and answer? There you go.
Sure. Every attempt was made to reach out to development and fundraising, and it was squashed. So even with somebody, a potential Duke donor reaching out, the development team worked to circle back to the donor and redirect his interests.
I didn't realize that I was unmuted and just giggled at the next question, which is, I would like to know more about the dog in the herbarium in the Crime Pays video.
That is a mystery to us as well. That is just in the picture to their podcast episode itself. It has nothing to do with our herbarium over at Duke. I'm not sure where that picture is from, but you should go check out the podcast and maybe even message their Instagram account as well to see what their answer is.
I believe the host of the podcast has two dogs that he takes with him to different places. So that's what the photo is from.
We have another question. Hi, I'm on the board of the American Society of Botanical Artists, and my role there is to help connect our members to botanists and herbaria. Do you have any suggestions as to how I could promote these interactions? Or interconnections, sorry.
Yeah, Barbara.
Oh, I think you're on.
I think I'm unmuted now. Well, I guess first, you need to find some herbaria to interact with. And I would recommend, if you're not sure where to find them, to go to Index Herbariorum and do a search on whatever city or area is available to you. I would imagine most herbaria would be very happy to have artists come. I know at New York, we frequently hosted artists, very frequently, who wanted to see specimens for inspiration for history projects, such as what Andrew was talking about, or just to give them ideas for future work. So I would reach out to the director of the herbarium and see if you can arrange a visit. It's a very common thing to do.
And also too, I mean, I would assume that you're going to botanical meetings and things like that too, but personal connections again and being able to share the work that you're doing would be helpful too. But you know, meetings like spinach and things, I feel like people are always looking for opportunities to share art. Okay, what is the current state of the Duke Herbarium? Have colleagues administration made contact after all the press or even acknowledged? Lots of time has passed, so just curious. And Kathleen is too. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Yeah, as I had hoped I'd made clear in my portion of this webinar, that Duke has gone mute. We know nothing. We live in a vacuum. We've been told nothing. Andrew, you want
Um,
to?
yeah, I mean, all we have is kind of you know, hearsay and rumors and nothing concrete. There were interviews for collections interested in you know, taking on the Duke Herbarium, but beyond those interviews, we have not heard anything.
I don't think Duke realized what an expensive proposition this was. To move 1 million specimens somewhere else is extraordinarily expensive. No one has the space. Nobody has the money. It would require a lot of people getting together to garner such funds and space.
The situation since January has changed so much in terms of how the university is thinking about its budget and operations. So frankly, the absence of communication is especially not surprising now.
Welcome to the Trump administration.
Yeah, so great. Yes. So next question is from Allison Colwell, which I realize I haven't said other people's names. Herbarium Emergency Fund from ASPT. Can this be enlarged? Do herbaria need to build foundations, endowments, seek nonprofit status outside universities? Is financial independence key to herbarium's futures? Barbara.
That's a great question. The ASPT does have an emergency fund, and you read the way that grows. Well, the way that it grows normally is by just donation of members. As you renew your membership, you can put in some extra money to that. I will say that several years ago, a donor who was concerned about Ukrainian herbaria donated a large amount to that fund, which is earmarked for that purpose. But so it can accept other donations too, if you know people who can do it. But it would be a really great step forward if all societies that have membership who work with collections started an emergency fund for their own types. The ASPT emergency fund doesn't have a lot of money, I mean, except for Ukraine, but it has helped. I mean, when I was president of ASPT, we did buy some new freezers, some emergency equipment. So it's a great stopgap measures, you know, to help. And there could be more active fundraising for those within the society as well. I'll just say that.
But I would also say all of these questions, I think, and suggestions, you know, I think, you know, going back to my presentation, I think just the more opportunities that you can pursue and avenues to, you know, try to make connections and make yourself relevant, you know, an endowment can't hurt. You know, trying to connect with local nonprofits can't hurt. Just the more connections and the more that we can kind of integrate collections within, you know, outside of institutions is helpful too. Donna Ford responded, be aware that funds in university foundations are not always protected. Yes, and Allison agreed. Next,
I might jump in really
Go ahead,
quickly
Andrew.
to about the question of funding. Some of the funding for the herbarium and the work that we've done has been coming through from the art history department, our art history visual studies department. So it's also important to think in terms of your collaborations, how that might also be related to, you know, pots of money.
I think this next one might be for you too, Barbara. How do we as a community do a better job of facilitating orphan collections in general rather than relying on the haphazard word of mouth system that currently exists in our domain? We'll be holding a meeting at Spinach 2025, coordinated by iDigBio, to discuss a more coordinated response, but would be interested in hearing other views. What role do Spinach and other organizations have to play here?
Well, I don't think this is a question for me because the meeting we're having at Spinach sort of was my idea in the first place. So I think what Andy is hoping for is that people have some other ideas. So I'm going to bow out and hope that people come up with some other things, other actions.
I just want to jump in and say, you know, the outreach we've had on Instagram, and now we're starting to also move to other platforms like Blue Sky as well. I think it's in the best interests of a lot of our collections and a lot of scientific infrastructure in general that has a place on social media. If we all, you know, continue collaborating, continue making content together, continue discussing some of these key issues that, you know, are facing all of our collections. And especially, you know, if your collection isn't at risk of divestment now, it's a good handle to have collaborations with all different types of collections, you know, across the globe in case something impacts one of us. And then we could all create, behind this network, we could all create some sort of response to this, either funding or a public response or otherwise, just like we did with Jillian's petition to try to engage some more support. I think that would be a great direction going forward if we continue fostering this network between all of our scientific collections.
Now the questions are really coming in. Okay. I'm going to, Kathleen, there's a question specific to plants in the herbarium that I'm going to pass for right now. Have there been examples of unionized herbaria where the union has successfully prevented closure of the herbarium through its collective bargaining power? As more museums unionize, are there strategies that unions with collection staff in their bargaining unit would be able to implement to that individual staff may not, the individual staff may not? I think that's a great idea. I don't know anything about this.
I don't know of any action like that. But you know, maybe that's a possibility if I don't know of any herbaria with fully unionized staff. But maybe there are some.
Why can folks speculate about why administrators, biologists have been firm in divesting in the herbarium despite the outcry? What are the motivations influencing this controversial decision?
Greed for space. Herbaria take up a lot of room, and that square footage needs to be paid for by somebody, and that has not served herbaria well. And even though herbarium like Duke has been extremely successful in garnering many digitization grants from NSF over the last decade or so, deans always say, well, that's wonderful. Now we can get rid of the herbarium because it's all been digitized. And we routinely get that as a comment from higher administrators, not understanding that the collection needs to be kept intact for obvious reasons. DNA can be taken from the specimens. God only knows what new techniques are going to arise in the near future that we will be able to use these specimens for.
Yeah, on top of that, one of the stated reasons given by Muhammad Noor is a desire to have a free hand in hiring whomever they want, without having to feel an obligation to hire people to maintain the collection.
Kathleen, how has your perspective changed on the importance of the collection at Duke during this process? Could you also speak to your experience in terms of the drive to continue advocating for your collection?
I'm not quite sure I understand that question, but my perspective is the same as it's always been. I just wish that I could have been more proactive and seen this coming. It is not coming from what one typically thinks as university bean counters or administrators. It is coming from people who are in the offices down the hall from you. And if they don't understand, I'm really at a loss for how to explain this except for greed.
I think the calculus on this has changed too. They've sort of argued that based on an analogy with the library or a rare book collection, that there needs to be a broader connection with the campus as opposed to excellence in a narrow research field. So that also seems to have been something that has changed.
Yeah, the Duke Herbarium really doesn't belong in a biology department. The Duke Lemur Center, we're very famous for the Lemur Center, but nearly lost it 20 years ago when it was part of the Department of Evolutionary Anthropology. And there was a lot of move by the then provost to give it independent status within the university and allow it to come under the direction of the provost so it could go after its own money and that sort of thing. Being part of a large biology department where there are 60 faculty, most of whom don't work on plants, is pretty ridiculous. It should have been moved out of there and made more safe by similar action that was taken with the Lemur Center to protect it.
I'm going to pull a question from the chat. I'm curious about it also. It says, hello, I'm Arturo Castro from the CIRDIR Herbarium in Durango, Mexico. I'd like to ask the panelists, is there a procedure in place at institutions in the United States that house botanical collections where herbaria are considered part of the institutional heritage? In Mexico, this seems to be working for the conservation of collections. I had somebody ask me this recently, that they were looking to see if their herbaria could be considered a collection to their state. So natural history or cultural history objects are often cared for within collections within states. And they were curious into looking into if this was something that their state collection could also look towards. Is this something that, does anyone have any comments or response to that?
I mean, I think it's a wonderful idea. That really wasn't part of the thinking of the Duke administration, given the announcement of the decision occurred in a centennial year when there's a lot of awareness and publicity on campus about the history of Duke. And so it's a wonderful idea. It just it didn't work here.
Well, I guess, yeah, but I think outside of Duke too, are there examples of any biological collections that are, that have been moved to be cared for within a state or, kind of thought of as some other collection that maybe there's funding allotted for? No.
I don't know of any that have been, transferred to the care of the state. I do know in some cases states have provided support for herbarium projects, maybe not recently. I think that in my conversations with historians, they are often quite surprised at what the information, the metadata that comes along with specimens, the examples of handwriting, the locality data, the combinations of people who collected in different places. And they see it as an underexplored resource for historical research. So I think it is something worth exploring with a state agency that might be interested in funding. There's a good bet that the collections made in a state collection were made by people who still have relatives in that area who might be interested to know the activities of their forebears. And it certainly is part of the regional history of an area, what in terms of what vegetation or animals used to be there. So maybe an underexplored resource.
Right. Thank you all so much for joining today. We had a wonderful turnout. I'm really looking forward to seeing how many countries were represented here, but it was many. And I think at one point we had about 200 people that were here live, so that was wonderful. Please, I just put the survey or the questionnaire there in the chat. We would love to hear from you, the good, the bad, anything, but if you're interested in continuing to be a part of this conversation or following along, please use that form, and we would love to hear from you. So thank you all so much, and hopefully we will see you in person sometime soon. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, everyone. It's been great.